everyone, welcome back to Sip and Talk. We are super excited to have all you Sip and Talkers tuning in today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. We have a really fascinating topic lined up.
We really do. But before we get into the heavy stuff, I have to tell you about last week. I was sitting in this Japanese ramen shop, right?
Okay, love a good ramen shop.
Oh, the broth at this place is legendary. But there was one massive problem. The air conditioning was completely broken.
Oh, no. In the middle of the summer?
Yes. It was brutal. You have to picture this. It's a packed room, totally sweltering, and everyone is just sweating profusely over these giant bowls of boiling hot soup.
That sounds like actual torture, honestly.
Right. And the people in line are grumbling, fanning themselves with menus, just totally miserable.
Yeah.
And as I was sitting there wiping sweat off my forehead for like the 5th time, I had this sudden epiphany.
Oh, yeah. What was the epiphany?
I just thought, life is hard enough on a normal day. On a super hot day like that, why can't people just live quietly and drink a cold beer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, why on earth would anyone, anywhere, actually want to go to war?
I mean, that thought you had in that sweltering ramen shop is perhaps the most fundamental universal truth of the human condition. It is just raw human nature.
Exactly. Who actually wants that kind of chaos?
Nobody. If you walk up to a Tokyo salaryman or, a food stall owner at Taipei's Fengjia night market or a commuter packed shoulder to shoulder on a New York subway, they'll all tell you the exact same thing.
Right. They just want to get through the day.
Exactly. Even if you look at the exhausted office workers in Beijing and Shanghai who are trapped in that brutal 9-9-6 grind, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week.
Oh, man, that 9-9-6 schedule is just punishing.
It really is. They are just desperately clinging to their jobs in a tough economy. No normal flesh and blood human being wants a devastating family-destroying hot war.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question for today's Sip and Talk. If ordinary people globally want the exact same thing, peace, quiet, and stability, why did the recent 2026 Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore feel like a ready-to-explode pressure cooker?
Yeah, the vibe there was incredibly tense this year.
For anyone unfamiliar, the Shangri-La Dialogue is Asia's premier annual defense summit. It's where all the top military minds gather. And behind all the tailored suits, the silk ties and the polished speeches about maintaining peace, it honestly felt like delegates were secretly taking the safeties off their pistols under the table.
That is a great way to put it. And that underlying tension comes from a massive structural narrative disconnect.
What do you mean by narrative disconnect?
Well, the entire world is desperately searching for the geopolitical breaks to avoid conflict. But at the exact same time, the Chinese party-state apparatus is stomping heavily on the military gas pedal.
Wow. So hitting the brakes while someone else floors the gas.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at a profound war readiness paradox. To figure out who is actually driving this escalation, we really have to look past the diplomatic pleasantries and examine the deeply fractured realities of the 3 main players in the room.
Right, which would be the U.S., Japan, and China.
Yep, those are the big 3 driving this dynamic.
So let's look at the U.S. stance first, which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth framed as pragmatic idealism. He took the stage promoting peace through strength, which, is a classic American line.
Right, very standard rhetoric there.
But his tone was incredibly pointed this time. He explicitly scolded European and NATO allies for free-riding on American taxpayers.
Oh, wow. He actually used the term free-riding.
He did. He bluntly stated that the U.S. needs partners, not protectorates. But at the same time, he lavished praise on Asian allies for stepping up their own defense spending.
That is a fascinating geopolitical calculus. The U.S. is attempting a very delicate balancing act right now. They are trying to pivot their military weight to the Indo-Pacific without actually triggering the exact conflict they're preparing for.
Yeah, but I struggle to reconcile the internal logic of that American strategy. Like, there is a glaring contradiction there.
Oh, absolutely. What stands out to you?
Well, the U.S. wants its allies to pay their own way and build up their own militaries, right, to relieve the burden on American taxpayers.
Right, that's the stated goal.
But if allies like Japan, for instance, become highly autonomous, heavily armed, and capable of operating completely independently, doesn't that inherently threaten America's absolute unipolar control over the region?
Bingo. That is the exact paradox of American foreign policy right now. Washington wants to outsource the exorbitant cost of global security, but they absolutely refuse to let go of the steering wheel.
Yeah, you can't really have it both ways.
You really can't. If you tell Tokyo, hey, we need you to be a fully capable, lethal military partner, you can no longer treat them like a junior partner who just follows orders.
Yeah.
You have to give them a real seat at the adult table.
And that structural shift perfectly explains the Japanese stance at the dialogue, which Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi framed as transparent defense.
Yeah, Japan's messaging was very deliberate.
It was. Koizumi pushed back incredibly hard against accusations from neighboring countries that Japan is reviving a new militarism.
Which is a heavy accusation to throw around.
Seriously. His argument was essentially, look, Japan has no nuclear weapons. We possess no strategic bombers. Therefore, calling us a militaristic threat is completely absurd.
Right, pointing to the hardware they don't have.
Exactly. He was heavily pushing the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy using what he called the 3 T's: trust, transparency, and talks.
Well, while the diplomatic focus is on trust and transparency, the actual tactical reality on the ground is being completely transformed by technology.
Oh, for sure. It's a whole new game now.
Yeah, Japan is heavily focusing on AI and automated drone defense networks. Just recently, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, spoke about how the AI revolution is fundamentally reshaping national power.
And wait, really quick sidebar for our Sip&Talkers. We always have to remind you that we are not financial advisors.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Any mention of AI, NVIDIA, or the broader tech market today is purely for data context and understanding geopolitical capabilities. It is definitely not investment advice.
Good catch. But yeah, getting back to the defense aspect, when we talk about AI in defense, we aren't just talking about smarter computers.
Right. It's way bigger than that.
We are talking about shifting the speed of warfare from human reaction time to machine reaction time. Predictive targeting, automated drone swarms that can overwhelm incoming missiles. This is a complete paradigm shift in how a nation defends its airspace.
It's honestly mind-blowing, Peck. But I have to challenge Japan's harmless narrative here.
Oh, I agree. It's not the whole story.
Right, sure, they don't have nukes.
Yeah.
But they are buying American Tomahawk cruise missiles, which are inherently offensive weapons.
Yep, you don't buy Tomahawks just to play defense.
Exactly. And they are upgrading their helicopter carriers so they can launch F-35B stealth fighters. Plus, they keep expanding their defense export roles.
It's a massive shift from their post-war posture.
It totally is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a guy standing there saying, don't worry, I'm just buying a shield, but the shield has these massive offensive spikes sticking out of the front of it.
I love that analogy. And when you forge a spiked shield like that, you trigger an immediate allergic reaction in Beijing, which completely dominated their approach at the summit.
Yeah, let's talk about China's stance. Interestingly, their defense minister, Dong Jun, was absent again.
Right, so a PLA professor, Meng Zhangheng, basically led the charge instead.
And instead of engaging with the current realities of AI defense or the tensions in the South China Sea, he went straight for the history weapon.
Classic deflection tactic.
Totally. He fiercely attacked Japan's World War II history. He essentially questioned if a country that hasn't cleaned up its militaristic toxicity from 80 years ago has any right to discuss modern defense architecture at all.
That tactic is just a textbook example of a logical loophole known as whataboutism. And it serves a very specific mechanical purpose for Beijing.
What's the main goal there?
Well, by anchoring the entire international conversation to 80-year-old history, China attempts to dodge accountability for its present-day actions.
Oh, that makes sense. Like, don't look at what we're doing now, look at what they did back then.
Exactly. If you can force your opponent to constantly apologize for the past, you never actually have to answer for what your own military is currently doing in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait. It just completely paralyzes the diplomatic dialogue.
Which honestly makes their behavior at the summit even more baffling to me. Like, if everyone at this forum, from Washington to Tokyo to Beijing, is loudly claiming to be the ultimate defender of peace, why is the tension escalating so rapidly?
It's a great question.
Right.
And the answer seems to lie completely outside the Shangri-La Hotel.
Really? Where is it coming from then?
It lies in the information cocoon. It's all about what these governments are actually telling their own citizens back home when the international microphones are turned off.
Ah, right. The domestic messaging versus the international messaging.
Precisely. To understand that cocoon, we have to look at the mechanical difference between deterrence and mobilization.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the U.S., Japan, and Taiwan are strictly focused on deterrence. And the underlying logic of deterrence is purely psychological.
It's about convincing the other guy not to try anything, right?
Exactly. It's about making the cost of war so incredibly high, so bloody, and so financially ruinous that the opposing side runs the calculation and decides an invasion simply isn't worth it. The entire goal of building up those militaries is to prevent the conflict from ever starting.
Conversely, when you look at China's internal propaganda and their domestic military directives, it operates on a completely different frequency.
Yeah, it's night and day.
It revolves entirely around Xi's explicit orders: prepare for war, dare to fight, win the war. They are actively revising their national defense mobilization law as we speak.
And even more concerning than that, they are setting up People's Armed Forces departments inside civilian state-owned enterprises.
Wait, really? Inside regular civilian companies?
Yes. For context, that means they are placing official military mobilization departments inside regular, everyday businesses.
That is wild. That creates a massive blind spot for the rest of the world. And it raises a critical question for me. Why is a party state actively mobilizing a civilian population that, as we talked about with my ramen shop epiphany, absolutely does not want to fight?
It's a massive contradiction.
Yeah.
And the answer really comes down to two severe internal contradictions within the Chinese party state itself. The first is the clash between survival and legacy.
Right. The survival aspect makes perfect sense. You have 1.4 billion regular citizens facing a severe economic slowdown right now.
Yeah, the domestic situation is pretty grim.
They are dealing with a real estate crisis that has basically wiped out generational wealth, and youth unemployment is soaring. The collective psychology of the country is just trying to survive, secure a paycheck, and maintain stability.
But that daily reality violently clashes with one man's historical rejuvenation narrative.
Meaning Xi's personal ambitions.
Exactly. His personal historical legacy is entirely tied to flipping the Western-led Pacific Order and absorbing Taiwan.
So the needs of the many are just being completely overshadowed by the historical ambitions of the top leadership.
That is exactly what happens when the highest levels of power lack any institutional brakes. Personal ambition becomes the sole driver of the state apparatus. And that leads directly to the second contradiction, which we can call the wolf is coming strategy.
I always find this strategy fascinating because it relies entirely on manufacturing a crisis out of thin air. How does it actually work in practice?
Think of it like a failing CEO. Imagine a CEO whose company is bleeding money. The quarterly earnings are a total disaster. The employees are miserable. Maybe they're starting to unionize.
Basically, the company is on fire.
Right. And to stop the board of directors from firing him, the CEO completely fabricates a rumor about a hostile existential takeover from a ruthless rival firm.
Oh, wow. So suddenly everyone stops paying attention to the terrible earnings.
Exactly. Suddenly, no one is talking about the bad earnings anymore. Everyone is unified against the external threat. By telling the Chinese public, the West wants to destroy us, the wolf is at the door, the state creates an artificial panic.
It's a cohesive distraction.
It is. This distraction justifies a massive, bloated military budget and demands absolute loyalty to the regime, conveniently distracting the public from the failing domestic economy.
I mean, I see how that works domestically, but I struggle to see how Beijing manages to sell that narrative beyond its own borders.
It does seem counterintuitive from a Western perspective.
Yeah, like if the Western democracies see themselves as merely the security guards of global trade, protecting the established order, how does Beijing successfully convince so much of the global South that the system is rigged against them?
Because the global South has a very different historical memory of exactly how that system was built. Let's look at the two global narratives without taking sides, just mapping out the logic.
Good idea. Let's keep it completely impartial.
So the Western democracies look at China's actions and see a textbook case of revisionist authoritarian expansion. They believe the rules-based international order, freedom of navigation, international law, free trade benefits everyone, and China is trying to tear it down.
But if you stand in Beijing or in many capitals across the global South, that exact same rules-based order looks like a rigged casino where America always owns the house.
Precisely. Think about how the post-World War II institutions were set up. The World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations Security Council.
Right, the foundations of the modern system.
When those rules were written, half the countries in the global South were still colonized. They had absolutely no voice. So when Washington says, we are protecting the rules, Beijing turns to the global South and says, why are you defending a unipolar system and rules that you didn't even get to write?
Wow, put that way, it's a very compelling argument for those nations.
It really is. From that perspective, China's military modernization isn't aggressive expansion. It is simply a nation reclaiming its rightful historical dignity and breaking an inherently unfair system designed to maintain Western hegemony.
So, with two completely opposing narratives that are both internally logically consistent to their respective believers, how do we actually make sense of the reality on the ground?
We have to strip away the rhetoric.
Right. We have to look purely at cause and effect. We really have to ask, who tipped the first domino that caused this massive regional arms race?
And to find that first domino, we have to examine the profound paradigm shift between two distinct eras in modern Chinese history.
For two eras.
If we look at the Jiang Zemin era, which ran roughly from 1993 to 2003, the guiding philosophy was Deng Xiaoping's famous geopolitical mandate: hide your strength, bide your time.
The contrast there is just stark. The Jiang era was basically like an intern on Wall Street.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, like as an intern, you keep your head down, right? You wear the suit, you fetch the coffee, and you strictly follow the established rules of the game to get rich and learn the trade. You explicitly do not make waves.
That was the playbook for decades.
But the Xi Jinping era, from 2012 up to today in 2026, their official motto shifted to striving for achievement. It's like that same intern has suddenly become the majority shareholder. He kicks down the boardroom doors, puts his boots on the mahogany table, and screams, "The old rules are dead. We play by my rules now."
That is incredibly accurate. And we aren't just talking about a change in diplomatic tone or angry speeches. The physical mechanisms of how those boardroom doors were kicked down are literally visible from space.
Right. It's the physical militarization of the region.
Yes. They took coral reefs in the South China Sea and physically dredged them into artificial islands. And then they eventually capped them with military runways and missile silos.
And they normalized military exercises that routinely crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait, basically erasing decades of established boundaries.
Exactly. And crucially, they heavily utilized gray zone tactics against neighbors like the Philippines.
We should probably define that for anyone new to the concept. Gray zone tactics are a very deliberate, cynical calculation.
They really are. How would you describe it?
Well, if China fires a traditional missile at a Philippine Navy ship, they trigger the Mutual Defense Treaty between Manila and Washington. That means open war with the United States.
Which nobody wants.
Right. But if they use a fleet of massive Coast Guard vessels to fire military-grade water cannons, blinding lasers, and physically ram Philippine supply boats, it is violently aggressive, but it sits just below the legal threshold of triggering that treaty.
It is operating perfectly in the gray zone between peace and war. And that tactical reality brings us to the core of the entire situation, the security dilemma.
How does that play out here?
When we connect all these physical actions, it becomes clear that Japan's massive shift toward AI defense networks, the Philippines aggressively pushing back in the South China Sea, and the U.S. rapidly strengthening its regional alliances. These are all reactions. They are not the initial cause.
That is a crucial distinction to make.
It really is.
Yeah.
When China transitioned from being a quiet rule follower to an aggressive rule rewriter, it unleashed a geopolitical gravity wave. That wave systematically forced every other nation in the region to arm themselves just to avoid being pulled under.
And bring this all back home to you, the listener. Looking at China's ambitions and the world's rapid awakening to those ambitions isn't about stirring up hate or pointing fingers just for the sake of it.
No, not at all.
It's about seeing cause and effect clearly. The world right now is going through an incredibly painful adjustment period. Democratic nations are actively learning how to coexist with an aggressive giant that is no longer hiding its strength.
And at the exact same time, China is facing a severe economic and diplomatic backlash because they showed their hand a bit too early.
Which leaves us with a really critical thought to ponder as we watch this global chess match play out over the next few years.
Yeah, this is something everyone should be thinking about.
The era of engagement, the decades-old Western belief that simply trading with an authoritarian regime and making them rich would eventually make them democratic, has officially ended.
A brand new geopolitical playbook is active now.
Exactly. So now that the entire world has seen the qualitative change of Xi Jinping's China, where do you think the next critical strategic defense line will actually be drawn?
Because it certainly won't just be physical lines on a map or islands in an ocean anymore. The next front line will be drawn in artificial intelligence, in semiconductor supply chains, and even in outer space.
That is a heavy but absolutely necessary question to sit with. Before we wrap up today, we just want to reiterate our core values here at Sip and Talk.
Always important to remind folks.
Definitely. This discussion today is an exercise in critical, independent thinking based purely on objective facts and observable actions. There is absolutely no intent to criticize or discriminate against any country, group, or its people. We just want to figure out the mechanics of how the world works together.
Beautifully said.
Well, Sip and Talkers, that is all the time we have for today's show. Be sure to subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss an exploration of the world's biggest issues.
Yeah, please subscribe. And hey, while you're at it, don't forget to check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, to watch the absolute newest, coolest travel vlogs.
So next time you're sweating in a ramen shop, just remember, it could always be worse. You could be trying to negotiate peace at the Shangri-La dialogue. See you next time.
For sure.